Hey crew! Yesterday, big announcement. We got 200 subs on the channel, which is exciting because I've never ever had 200 subs on this channel before. So we're gonna do something cool to celebrate that fact. We're gonna try building out this little header thing. I'm gonna go through some design details and I'm gonna go through some responsive stuff, like the usual stuff I do in the videos that I make. So we're gonna be building this out. Not quite exactly the same, but close. And I'm going to show you some stuff about icons and about making it mobile responsive. This header here, it's basically a menu, and you'll see it a lot in dashboards. And it's a separate element, and it's usually separate because when you look at your dashboard responsively on mobile, this will disappear. So that's the first thing that we need to figure out, is how to make this as a block and make it disappear on mobile. So let's get right to it. As you can see, as usual, we're going to start with a blank page. We're going to close the assistant. We're going to double click here. We're going to make it full width, and we're going to uncheck the fixed width so that it takes up the full width of the page, as you already know. I've talked enough about floating groups that I don't feel like going into detail about what they are. Check out the other videos if you don't know what they are. Flat color and yellow. And now we're going to have basically a floating group. And this floating group, we have to make it basically whatever we put inside, we do want it to scroll if we have a lot of elements that are outside of the viewport, such as, let's say your user is going to be using a phone and you have a lot of menu items and they go all the way down to further than the phone can see. Basically, we're going to line the bottom of the repeating group to the bottom of the page, and then we're going to use both here. If we use both, basically what should happen is if the viewport is too small to accommodate all of the elements, I'll show you right here, you're actually going to get a scroll bar appear and you're going to be able to scroll through that floating group. And if the page actually has enough room for everything, then you'll lose the scroll bar and it'll be a fixed element. Okay, so now we have our menu. We have our basis for what we're going to be building out inside, and we can remove these example elements. And then we're going to have to eventually get rid of it. So we're going to give it a state, and the state will be is showing. Okay, and a custom state is just a variable that lives at the client level on your user's browser. We're going to go default value no, because we're going to make it actually appear. And we're going to go conditional when this floating groups is showing is yes, then it is visible yes. And we're going to uncheck visible on page load. And then we're going to add just a little tester button here in our main content, and we're going to go element actions, element set state of the floating groups is showing to be, and then we're just going to toggle the boolean, and this is how you do that in Bubble. We actually call it again is showing is no. Okay, so the way that this works, I don't want to explain it in a ton of detail. You can play around with it, but basically this is how you toggle a boolean in Bubble the easiest way. Big shout out to Keith, who showed us how to do this on the forums. Thanks a lot. It's helped a lot in my own development. So floating group A has an is showing. Okay, it starts out no, and then we say set the value to be, and then we ask what the value is. Floating groups A is showing is no. So if the floating groups is no, it'll evaluate to a yes. No, sorry. If it's no, it'll evaluate to a no, and it'll set the value to no. If it's yes, it'll evaluate to a yes, and it'll set the value to yes. So you can play around with that. But basically, once we come on here in our preview, we'll have our button, and we said isn't visible on page load, and then we can actually show it and hide it with our little toggle boolean, which is actually amazing. Okay, so now we have our menu. I think it's narrow compared to this. This is a tablet setup. We're going to assume that this is roughly 350 pixels. So we're going to build it out that way. Naturally, you can play around with it and to suit your needs, but it's a little bit wider than it is than what we had it at, and we need room for this picture here, a name, some labels and stuff. I'm not going to put this in the database. I'm just going to leave it, and you guys can basically link it to your user when you have a user. We're going to set this up to be the full width of the floating group, and then I'm looking here and I'm thinking, okay, this is slightly bigger than 30, must be like 40. I'm going to take a random guess, and I'm going to put this group in here, and I'm going to load a picture into it, and then we're going to be able to see. Let me just go find where I put pictures of people that I can load. Here's a good one. and this is going to be our user. Now there's two ways to make this round. Obviously, if it's a dynamic image, there's two ways to make it round. So I'm actually going to show you why wouldn't I. Let's go to data, let's go to file manager, and let's find that picture that we just uploaded by pressing A, pressing enter, pressing search, and then deleting and pressing search. They're going to revamp this, I assume, but let's copy the file name here, because the file name should actually be, oh no, sorry. We have to go to view, then we have to copy the URL, and then we can actually use the URL in dynamic data. Let's clear this, let's insert, no, not dynamic data. Yeah, we have to. Uh-oh. I wasn't thinking straight. Let's go to data types, user. Let's create a new field called image. I would never store this in user, but I'm just trying to show you how to put a mask around it. Let's go app data, all users, new entry, and let's re-upload that image. And the email, you need an email to actually create the user. So let's create a fake email. And now we should have a user. Okay. And let's load that user's image in here. Whoops, I didn't want to do that at all. Let's load that user's image in here, current user's image. And then we can actually process it with ImageX because it's a dynamic image, and then we can say apply a circle ellipse mask. And then we could actually lower the quality because it's a small picture. I mean, the representation is small and it'll be quicker to load. Do we want a fixed width? I don't know. This is really, really big, 88. It's smaller. This looks like maybe 60 to 65 for the picture. So we're going to actually leave it at about 65 because we're only going to have a picture and not that little thing around it. And then I'm going to put in some actual text here. And the actual text will be username and then user last, and then we have some actual content to put in here. Okay, so this is not really the point of this, but I thought why not. It looks like quicksand, so we're gonna go ahead and style that. I don't know, you guys seem to like it when I actually go through the steps of it seems a bit bolder than 500 actually. Let's go quicksand 600, center it, and let's give it a color that's not so abrasive. I'm gonna leave it white instead of the blue that they're using, but let's copy this, drag it down, and instead of quicksand 600, we're gonna go quicksand regular. And then they're going to have, that's 14K, so this could be 16 for a little bit more oomph. Make sure that it fits, center horizontally. And usually I would load this data dynamically, but, and then they said big boss 3 or something. I don't know, I don't remember. Okay, so now we have this part set up 2 level, I see. Okay, and then you need followers and following. Let's see if we could find the user. That's smileys, eh? Can we find the user? Let's go person. I've never actually used this. This is my first time. Man, beard, person, frowning. Person in lotus position. I like this emoji. So let's go ahead and just copy this emoji here if I can. Thank you. And let's paste it in some text. And then this will show up differently on browsers, but it'll be generally the same thing. Let's remove the style. Let's make it a little bit bigger so we can actually see what's going on. And then that didn't really help. And then they said, what, followers or something? And then I would add data, like the dynamic data of the user. It's much too big. Let's bring it back down to 14. How are they doing it? They're doing a big number in white and check and followers. Anyways, I'm not going to go through that because the important piece, and I have to keep this tutorial short enough, the important piece is actually the data that we're going to load inside the menu and how we're going to make it responsive. Okay, so we've done this, so that's good. I would align this, make sure the margins were correct, but we're just going quickly through this. I just wanted to show you that you can actually copy paste emojis and use them as your menu items because we're going to actually be doing that. Then we're going to have a group that's going to hold the actual menu items themselves. So that's cool. But first we need to make sure that that it shows up when it's wide and that it disappears when it's small, and that's basically what we're going to do here. we're going to have basically content inside, right? And that's going to be all of our dashboard stuff. I'm just going to put this in right here. And I wonder if we can just load up some random content as a no, too much work for nothing. So here's a purple group that's going to be our content group, and the problem is when we do this way and we go to responsive, the purple group is actually going to slide underneath the floating group at some point, right? Even though right now it should be, no, it's line center, okay. Right now this is actually new, that it stays left until it reaches it's actually working with the repeating group. This is brand new. That's cool. So they're making changes to the responsive editor. So let's usually what you'll do is you'll hide the floating group itself, and you'll put a bumper in to make sure that the purple group never slides underneath. And then you're going to actually collapse this bumper group. It's going to be fixed width, and so is our floating group. And then what happens is this purple group will start sliding underneath, and we don't actually want that to ever happen. So we're going to basically put a bumper here, and then when we reach our breakpoint, which we're going to pick 940. So when we reach our breakpoint, where we go to tablet mode, we want the menu to actually have to be opened by the user so that the content can take up more of the screen real estate. And so we're going to go add hiding rule and save, and as you see, it'll actually collapse the content in, and then we're going to be able to, when we actually view this, and the menu is on, so the menu is on here, we're going to go Control-Shift-M on Firefox. I think it's Control-Shift-J on Chrome. Okay, let's go Control-0, Control-Shift-M, Control-Shift-M again. And now you'll see, if you look up here at 1200, as we get smaller and smaller, at 940, the purple group actually collapsed in. And the next thing we need to do is when the purple group collapses in, we're going to hide this this group here, and when it comes back out, we're going to show it, and we're going to do those with conditionals when a condition is true. So we're going to pick when a condition is true, and we're going to say when page width is bigger than 940, and we're going to say every time we're going to set the state of the floating group to be is showing to be either no on no, bigger than 940, sorry, is yes, and then we're going to copy that and we're going to paste it in, and now this is going to be smaller or equal to 940. We're going to set this to no, correct. So now we should have basically a floating group that appears on page load, even though it's hidden on page load. Every time it's bigger than 940, it'll actually show up. So here's our group, and then oh yeah, let's do a little something. I don't know why I did all that stuff with the image. That was just basically a waste of time. Sorry about that. But here it is, since we're doing it. And let's go Control-Shift-M, and as we go like this, boom, it disappears. But then we can manually open it, and if I still had access to my button, we can manually close it. So that's the next thing we're going to do here. We're going to go Design. We're going to put in a little group here that'll basically allow us to hide the menu. Let's put it in the floating group so we have access to the floating group again. We're going to make it 30 by 30, and we're going to set it at 1515, and we're going to make sure that this has no overlap. And then inside we're going to put a menu icon that I don't have. Yeah. Okay. This is annoying because I built this after every time I click outside of the floating group, this one comes in front. If you want to bypass that, right click here and say bring to front, and then when you click away, it'll actually stay on the front, and you can develop a little bit more easily. Okay, so let's put in an HTML element here, and I'm just going to go find my SVGs and grab the menu one and paste it in here and select first parent, and then the group itself is going to have a workflow, and I'm going to say element actions set state of floating group A's is showing to be no, and that's perfect. And now we just need, actually, yeah, now that I think about it, we're going to do this a little bit differently. We're going to grab a floating group, another one, and we're going to make sure that this floating group, let's give it a background color of green so you could see it on the page, will basically float above this one here, and then we're just going to put the workflow on it to toggle a conditional again, just like we did in the button. So set state of floating group A's is showing to be floating group A's is showing is no. And then when we click on this, center horizontally, center vertically, and when we click on the green group, basically it's going to show the floating group, and when we click on it again, it's going to hide the floating group. So that's pretty much what we want. Let's just make sure that our margins are good, because we should be sticklers for margins as designers. Let's go with an X or a close, and we're going to add this as a conditional on the icon that when floating group A's is showing, I should rename these right now, the HTML is showing is, yes, then the HTML will be the X icon instead of this icon, okay? Let's make this a flat color of none, and then let's rename this to FL menu left so we know what we're talking about. Okay, so now after all this, we should actually have this floating group visible on page load, and then we should be able to hide and show it, okay? But this is only important if the page is small, so that we can show and hide the menu if the page is on mobile. And like I said, we can actually scroll through this one independently without scrolling through the page itself. Okay, so this will be really good for mobile. And then on our wider pages, we actually have it show up here on the side, and then we can start building out our menu options so that you know, we give users something to actually go through. And then the next thing is we want this to be only visible when the page is smaller than 940, right? So let's go when page width is smaller or equal. It's very important because that 1 pixel could throw off, you know, somebody important. And we're going to go with this element is visible true, and we're going to make it invisible on page load. And the reason I do it this way instead of visible on page load and then hide it is because it actually makes your page loading faster. Bubble doesn't load elements that aren't visible, and it loads them based on the conditionals if they are visible. So actually, if it's invisible on page load, Bubble won't take up the resources. If it's invisible on page load, Bubble won't take up the resources to actually load it until it's needed. And here it's needed, so it shows up, and here it's not needed, so it won't take up the resources to show it. Cool? Cool. Okay, so now what we can do, we could build out any content within this purple group, and as long as we keep it centered in the purple group, it'll always stay centered on the page, because this actually collapses back in on mobile. So let's give you an example of that. I'm going to group this into a group, and I'm going to make this group my content group, select first parent. And like I talked about in the tutorial for Mo's, this is how I build mine. Usually they're at 340, but I'll leave it at 352 because it doesn't matter. And let's go flat color, and let's go blue here. And this will be my safety. Usually I'll apply some margins to it, and then this one will be centered horizontally in my safety. And then I'll go to responsive, and I'll grab this one, and I will say you can collapse at whatever size, so you can take up all of the width that you're allowed to take up, okay? So here we built the purple with no safeties. Let's build in the safeties. 27 is too much, but you know, 20 is a good margin. And then let's actually build it right. 23, 17, it's gonna be annoying. 18, there you go. Center this horizontally. And now you'll notice you have your safeties on either side. Oh, that's annoying. I totally forgot when you collapse, the margin actually collapses. So usually when I build them out this way, I'll go like this, and then I'll have to put my safety inside the actual group itself. That's why I had that like that. Okay. So when you build out your content, make sure you have your safeties inside, because when you collapse in Bubble, it gets rid of your safety margins. And then, yeah, build your safeties out inside, and then you can make sure that your stuff never overflows. And then you have your little menu item right here, and that's basically the skeleton for building out a left side menu. You build your content in here, that's your menu. Next, quickly repeating groups. We're going to load in some menu options, and I'm going to quickly talk about that. How far in are we? 20 minutes? That's not bad. That's not bad at all for a 200 sub thing. I might as well give you guys all of the stuff that I know. Okay, we're going to go rows 1, columns 1. Actually here, we have to go rows 1, columns 2, and it'll always stay at columns 2, but we will give it a full list. Let's keep the separator in for now, and let's go full list. instead of vertical scrolling. And we're going to be loading some stuff in the repeating group. And the stuff that we're going to be loading is, we have to actually create it, and we're going to call this menu underscore items. Now I'm typing in my debugger for some reason. Okay, menu items, create a new field. And the first thing we're going to need is a title, field type text. And then we're going to try something that I've never done before. We're going to go icon as a text. Usually I go icon as a text and I just grab the SVG text. So let's say, you know, I grab this SVG text and then I'll go app data and I'll go new entry and I'll, whoops, not for you, new entry for menu items. And I'll throw in an icon here and I'll say title dash board. I grabbed the clock, but it doesn't matter. And then I'll have an actual menu with an icon that I can load into here. So if I go type of content, I can go do a search for menu items, and then I can go do a search for menu items. Usually my setup is a little bit more complex. I have IDs, I have tags, I have menus because I build them all in here. So, but for our purpose, we're just gonna have the one thing called menu items, and we're gonna load them in here. And the first thing I'm gonna load is an HTML because it's an SVG. I'm gonna load it in here, and I'm gonna say parent group cells menu items icon, and then it's gonna load in here, and then I'm gonna go here and say parent cells menu items title, and then that one's gonna load in here. Then I'm gonna group the whole thing into a group, and I'm gonna put the group all the way through so that I can actually click on it to go to places, and then I will go here. There it is, dashboard. It's not centered, but we have the makings of something cool. And then the next few things that we could do, let's remove the style here, let's center it, and then let's go here, and let's go conditional when this group is hovered. We can go background style. Well, it should already have a background style, but background color. Not my best day. Okay, like this, so that your user knows that they've actually hovered on it. And the more you add in the data tab, so now this is what we have. When I hover it, it'll actually change colors. It'll be ugly because I'm not picking my colors today, but when you hover it, it'll actually show colors, and you can scroll through to see the rest of your menu items. So let's load in some more. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There's 8. And then we're going to, yeah, I don't know, feather. And the icon, this is what I wanted to try today. Let's go to emoji and look for a feather. I wonder if I can actually make this work in real time. Aw, there's no feather. I'm sure there's a unicorn. Unicorn face. Let's see if this actually works. I'm gonna put in the unicorn here. I'm gonna make sure that it's just the unicorn. And we're gonna see if it loads. There it is. That's cute. I guess what we should do in our case is put in a text that's enormous. So let's go with, like, I don't know, like 96. And then insert dynamic data, parent groups, menu items, icon. And this is ridiculous. And then it should actually just load the emoji. It's gonna look weird with my SVG, but the unicorn should be there and should be big. There it is. Wow. That's great. Okay, so you now can load just emojis if you put it in as text. I had no idea. I'm going to go ahead and not do that because I don't actually know how well that's going to work, but I'm just going to grab some SVGs like I usually do. But that must be incredibly quick to load. And the other thing that you can use is font awesome icons. Same thing with the text, and you just use the FA tag. I'm not going to go into that today, but I've started building out menus with this, and they actually work really well. And I mean, they're very recognizable, font awesome icons, and that must be one of the quickest things to load because Bubble preloads these in your CSS anyways, whether you like to or not. So I might actually make the switch from SVG to font awesome sometime in the near future. But yeah, you guys do some stuff and let me know. And we're just gonna add just a few more here so we can see what's going on, and then we're going to go through the how to change the pages in a single page app. Yeah, we're just going to load the first 3, and then I would style this to make it look good. But then let's make pretend that I have many groups here. Okay, I'm going to show you 2 things that'll throw you off while you're developing, and then that'll be the whole tutorial. We're going to call this page 2. We're We're going to call this page 1. And we're going to call the other one page 3. If you've been following this channel for a while, my very first video, I think I showed you how to navigate passing URL parameters. But that's what we're basically going to redo here. Now we're just going to change the colors of these so that we can notice that we've actually changed through the pages. Okay, so we have 1 purple, 2 green, 3 gray, and when we click on these, I actually want the different pages to show up. So we're going to put in conditionals and we're going to say when get data from page URL p, I still use this, is 1, then this element is visible true. Okay, and get data from page URL, we actually are going to be passing parameters to our URL, and I'll explain that in a sec after I apply this to all of these. And then I will make them invisible on page load so that they don't take up any resources. Oh yeah, and the other thing is I want to collapse them as well. Collapse element on page load when it's hidden. Okay, and we'll let one no, we're not going to do that. Now we're going to actually have to tell them to show up. This is going to be a problem though, because if you remember I said align to both. Align to both calculates the difference between the bottom of the page and the bottom of the floating group, applies that. From the top of the page to the top of the floating group, applies that, and then adds a scroll bar if you need it. The problem with this is it's actually going to not show up anymore because the bottom is so far from the floating group that, like I said, you can't even see it anymore. So if you run into that problem, it's probably because you have your menu aligned to both. It's not being invisible, it's actually just not visible on your screen because it's too small basically. So you're going to make sure when you're building out these menus that you touch top and bottom, otherwise it's not going to show up. Okay, next what we want, if you'll notice, our URL is version test and then your URL parameters start. Debug mode equals true. If I remove this, you'll see the debugger, this guy right here, is going to disappear. And it'll be replaced by the bubble banner on a hobby app or nothing if you're on a paid app, and then your debugger goes away. Well, that's how URL parameters work. They start like this, and then you can add as many URLs as you want. And we said if and p equals 1, first page shows up. There's your first page. We said if p equals 2, second page shows up. There's your second page. It didn't collapse for some reason. And p equals 3, third page shows up. There's your third page. Okay, so we gotta find out why these guys aren't collapsing properly. I'm gonna assume it has to do with the R line and the R box that's associated to the bumper, so we're just gonna grab them all and put them in yet another group. So all of our contents are now in a group because I'm assuming the bubble R box can't deal with the fact that there's a bumper here because of the way that they have absolute positioning, and I pray, and many other people on the forum too are praying that that disappears when they bring us a new method of putting in layouts. It was exactly that. Okay, so we have P1, P2, and P3, which should all be different colors here in the background, you'll notice, and that's because they're all separate pages. Now we want to load those pages using these little navigation parameters, and then we're going to go start edit workflow. We're going to say go to page, and it doesn't actually, if you pick the same page that you're already on, so right now we're on index and you pick index, it won't actually change the pages, and that's what makes Bubble so good for single page apps. And we're going to go current cells index, because that's why I picked 1, 2, and 3, so I could just draw it from the cells index. If I click on the first cell, it'll be a 1, 2, but you can also add in data, which is what I usually do, a human readable p-value, and then you say p equals that p-value, and instead of showing p equals 1, it'll show p equals, and then something that a human can read, which is slightly better in my opinion. Okay, but now we should actually be able to navigate through the pages by clicking on these guys right here. Yep. You'll notice they all change pages, and now you have a single page app with the left aligned menu that's actually responsive. But the last thing to do for responsive is actually to add a workflow to here and to say, hey, when you navigate, we'll set state of floating group. No, it's now called FL, sorry, menu left. We're going to change its showing to no first, and then we're going to navigate away, but only when the page width is smaller or equal to 940, and the only thing that does is improve our UX when we're on mobile, because when somebody navigates from the menu, it's usually because they want to go to that page and not necessarily stay here. Okay? And maybe we could do a lot more stuff, but I think we're going to wrap this up with just if this group is hovered, or get p from page URL is current cell's index. Formatted as text. Will you work? That's a text, right? Yeah. Okay, so what I said is basically if we're on that page, then you keep your color. See, we're on 1, so here's 1, p equals 1. Let's go to p equals 2, and now I should be able to see p equals 2 is blue. And there you go. You have all the foundations for making a single page app with a left menu. Okay, I hope this was useful, and thanks for the 200 subs, and I look forward to 300 where we can make some really cool full page heroes, and I guess we will see you guys then.